So Andy, I can't believe how we haven't met before. We both had a similar kind of journey, different in many ways, of course, but you are to me one of the true pioneers of electrification, who I think for a lot of people, maybe the younger people, don't actually know where your origin came from in terms of that electrification perspective. So you're at Nissan, you pop up in Revenge of the Electric Car, you're a champion of the Leaf, of course, the development of that, and of a whole bunch of focus in and around Nissan on electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And then it seems you did a kind of volte-face. There you are at the heart of electrification, and then suddenly you're at the helm of a British classic prestige sports car company. Can you give us a sense of how that happened and why it wasn't a volte-face?
Well, I certainly don't think it was. I suppose I started on electric cars. It's probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
When I think it's fair to say that Nissan was a pioneer in the thinking, and obviously, Tesla's played a big role in terms of the identification and popularization of electric cars. But Leaf probably started first, and I led that project.
Yeah. And the
NV200,
Yeah.
and I suppose had I not left Nissan, there was at least two others that were in the pipeline.
That's intriguing.
But I mean, the two are not incompatible. I mean, I had the opportunity to become the chief executive of Aston. Aston.
Yeah. What's not to like about that opportunity?
And it's the last British car company, and I kind of set a raison d'etre of basically making sure that Aston is the last British car company, or the first British car company, whichever way you want to look at it. But basically that it survives the next 100 years.
Yes.
And in that context, you have to bring that electrical experience to bear. And basically right from the very beginning, almost day one, I said we need an electrification strategy,
Yeah. Wow.
Electrification of Aston Martins,
Yes.
so hybridization, and the development of a strategy for Lagonda, where Lagonda is only a BEV brand.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's been incongruous, this switch, this change, because I can clearly see, I follow these things, as I think you know, quite kind of forensically, really. And I think that development now that you have with the product, that building of the supply chain, working with Williams, and correct if I'm wrong, so the Rapid E is the first vehicle to have a British manufactured and designed battery inside it, which is the Hyperbat battery, which is a battery factory in the UK. Perhaps a lot of people don't even know there is one. And obviously that's come about really because of your partnership and cooperation with Williams. And are there any other areas where that's kind of seeding of the supply chain has been going on, which is part of your ambition and your plan?
Well, clearly to make a great British car company, you need a great British supply base. There's a lot of talk about funding of battery factories and stuff like that in the press at the moment. The reality is, much of it is not very useful to us as a high performance manufacturer.
Yes.
So we're looking for specific types of batteries, and obviously we turn to Williams as a provider that had been very much in the Formula E space. And bring their skills to bear with our skills. Electric cars are interesting. You see a lot of startups in electric. There are 400 startups in China alone.
Yes.
And what of course is driving that is the apparent ticket to entry is simpler. An electric car is simpler than an internal combustion engine, at least superficially.
Superficially is exactly the word.
Yeah. And what all of these guys forget is that whilst you can perhaps get your head around the motor, the inverter, the battery management, you've still got to wrap a car around it. And from those 15 years of experience, you have to be careful about things that batteries hate. Batteries hate drag. Batteries hate weight.
Yes.
Two of the things that sports car manufacturers are really good at, and Formula One teams are very good at.
Yeah.
So by basically exploring our strengths as a manufacturer, by bringing the supply chain, by nurturing the supply chain, my goal is that the UK has at least the seeds of a longer lasting ability to be a manufacturer of electric cars. The moonshot is it's very interesting because it was a narrowly defined problem, and people could get around it and understand what that needed to happen in order to solve that problem. I think the problem is that our politicians around the world are probably ill-educated in terms of really climate change, really the issues around the use of carbon, and you seek a populist type of commentary.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You have to look at all of the other causal factors of if CO2 is the problem, then you really do need to look at the marine industry, farming,
agriculture, absolutely right.
Air travel,
Yes.
etc., etc. If it's pollution in the city, well, let's take London just as an example. 50% of the particulates in and around Westminster are caused by public transport. Okay, so let's look at how you quickly move buses and taxis to electrification. And there you very quickly have a solution. So the point is, define your problem, define what you want to solve, and then let the industry go at it.
Many of these companies, it's just the industry is maturing. People are, moving around in these ways where they're cross-fertilizing ideas, experience, knowledge.
It's natural. It's natural in any revolution. There are a few experts that do very well out of it. Move around and do stuff. They're nurturing their own experience, but of course they're also fertilizing the ground and creating circumstances for other people to learn.
Yes.
And that's why I love the fact that we do it at Aston.
Yep.
We do it in the UK. And if you think about what the UK is really good at, the UK is really good at making a low volume luxury and sports cars.
Yep.
So I have to smile a little bit when I see, governments and commentators talking about a mega factory that can make, mass manufacturing of batteries. It might be very interesting.
Talking again.
It's talk. It's just talk, and the amount of money that they talk about putting in is a drop compared to what the European Union is talking about right now. So if you want to be serious about batteries, let's get serious. Absolutely.
Yep.
However, actually, probably be better off nurturing our low volume industry, because low volume industry generally also means high price luxury, which is the right end of the industry to really start to talk about making profits out of electric cars. Electric car technology is expensive. You need a high price to even contemplate making a profit on these cars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really believe this because I think I've done a little bit of work with Marty Rimac, and I think I dropped you a message a few years ago where I said you should really know about this company and in Croatia, and you just sent a very nice note back saying thank you very much. Yes, I do. Obviously, so there's certain aspects of an electric vehicle which is similar to any electric vehicle: peak torque from rest.
Yeah.
So how do you blend into that with the integration of things, that character and personality of Aston Martin? I think I felt, well, I wasn't driving it, I think I felt that in the Rapide E. So how is that working? What is a challenge for your teams to do that?
So you make choices right from the very beginning, and it would have been, I suppose, the sports car manufacturer, it would have been easier for us to say, let's have a ludicrous mode or the equivalent. Actually, given our background, what we made a decision that we wanted to be able to do at least a couple of laps of the Nürburgring,
right,
which moves you to a different profile of use, different chemistry, in fact, and a different charging. So we don't look for outright acceleration. We obviously look for relatively low drag and relatively low weight, and we ultimately tune around torque rather than power.
Yes.
And what you're looking for is a car that is more like a GT car if it was in its petrol guise, where you're able to use that torque more effectively, but not necessarily draw on peak power. Car that you drove in today has an enormous torque.
I think certainly did.
950 Newton meters, I think.
Crazy.
And it's tuning around that. That's where the character of the GT comes, and obviously a GT character is in tune with what an Aston Martin stands for.
Yeah.
Now the question for us actually is does that prevail when we start thinking about Lagonda. Lagonda, obviously a separate brand, obviously a longer history than Aston Martin. It was formed in 1899. It's more of a luxury. It used to compete with Rolls-Royce and Bentley. Is that tune, that characteristic that we're creating for an Aston, is that appropriate to a Lagonda, or perhaps do we want something else? But these are questions that as the product planners have to answer, because you're talking about the DNA of the car.
Yes, I think there's a great place for prestige, for high value, for hypercars, for electric cars that Martin Rimac makes, that Pininfarina make, that you're making, because I think that breadth of product certainly stimulates, as you mentioned earlier, where is the profitability, where is the supply chain kicked off and created. These are enabling technologies and people to make the whole market work.
Yeah.
And do you really believe that? I do, but do you really believe that people do either A, understand that, or B, believe that it's a credible proposition, and that we're not just saying it as an excuse to justify having all this exotica?
But there's two things that have to happen if you believe in electric technology, as clearly we do, and you want to see mass adoption, as clearly we do, then two things really have to happen. One, first of all, you've got to stimulate customer demand, and at the moment, the predominant ingredient to customer demand is the grant aid the various governments around the world give it, and you can see that. Last month sales came down because government took incentives off of plugins.
Yeah, and China's in an interesting place.
China's in an interesting place. So you've got to get above around 2% market share, 2% of the TIV, before you get this kick.
Yeah,
so
momentum.
So this is the first point. Second point is the manufacturers have to be profitable. And the problem with electric cars is, and I know everyone will go, oh, that's a dirty word, it's profit. The reality is that you need to make profit in order to reinvest and reinvest. You've got to start coming down that Moore's curve of technology. And to do that, you've got to have more and more investment going in. The best way of starting that is in the exotica.
Yes.
So it's in the sports cars, it's in the luxury cars, where you've got higher margins, you've got pricing capability, and that's where you'll find a lot of the early adopters.
Yes, and I guess if you can get to the extreme end of capability, if you're going right to those parts of battery performance, motor inverter performance, etc., power electronics, if you can then finesse things at that extreme, I won't say it's easy, but then the rest of the stuff comes quicker.
Yeah, it does. Look, you also got to rid of perceptions. I think it's almost gone, but there's still that perception that an electric car is a milk float. Actually, if you're at the other end, if you're in the Rimac and hopefully Rapide area, you can dismiss those preconceptions about what battery technology gives you.
It's funny you reference a milk float, because the first electric vehicle I ever drove, I was 11 years old, and I used to help Tony Scarf, the milkman. I had to find him at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to help him on the milk round, and he let me drive the milk float sometimes. So that's the first one I've driven. And I didn't drive the Rimac because Marty took me out in it, but so I've actually been in both those extremes, which I suppose is partly because I'm knocking on a bit, but
And you can see the immense movement in technology over that period. That was a platform full of lead acid batteries that you were in on the milk float.
Yeah.
It's a very advanced usage of lithium-ion batteries in the Rimac.
Yeah, amazingly so. And then it's a bit confusing at the moment as to, well, what do you actually mean by ban? What is being banned? Why is it being banned?
Yeah.
How does it all come together? How do you sort that out?
I think it starts with governments. It's not just the UK, as you say, but governments being confused, to be frank. First of all, what are they trying to solve? I think governments should start with the problem, and you leave engineers to solve the problem, right?
100%.
So basically, are you trying to solve CO2?
Yep.
Or are you trying to solve air quality? Because diesel engine is a pretty good solution to CO2, but it's not such a good solution to air quality. So if you're looking for a blend, then there are various ways of thinking about appropriate technologies. What I think government makes a mistake is by picking technology winners, because they're not. As an engineer, I don't know what technology is going to be around in 2040, so I have no clue how a non-engineer would know that. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to allow innovation to mature. Undoubtedly, batteries play a big role in the future. But you know, we shouldn't exclude hydrogen, and we also shouldn't exclude e-fuels.
Yeah.
So I think, ask me to stargaze or crystal gaze. I think there's probably still combustion engines around in 2040, and they're probably not using carbon as a combustion. But there are plenty of alternatives which are in the labs right now, which could provide an alternative. And there's some type of customers where just pure battery is perfect. There's going to be other times where internal combustion with batteries, hybrids, is going to be the right way to go. And there's going to be some places, perhaps in commercial vehicles, where hydrogen is the right way to go. But I'm sure that we won't be 100% electric in 2040.
Yeah.
And the way that it's presented, actually, it's presented as electrification.
Yeah, it is.
Not
very careful political
very
distinction.
clever wording, or not so clever wording, because that includes hybridization. But I'm sure that anyway, engineers, you can't bind them to one direction. They will invent, they will innovate, and they will come with alternatives.
Well, that's the key point, and you need to preserve jobs. You've seen actions taken in the last few years in the UK, for example, essentially the demonisation of diesels, which has had a significant negative impact on our own car industry. Likewise, I suppose, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it, but the uncertainty around Brexit undoubtedly creating, caused by politicians, undoubtedly creating problems for our industry. So you're right. You've got to do two things. I mean, one, you've got to the car industry will solve these problems. This question is whether UK is involved or not. And it's my intention is not to get into big debates. Just get on with it.
Yes. So, what lessons have we got to learn, if any, from China? Do you think?
Well, China is ahead on electrification, and there are you can identify lots of negatives around the way that China manages itself. But on the positives, it works in 5-year plans. And it basically creates a plan and it executes as a plan, and the plan is executed almost perfectly in each of those 5 years. In other words, there's a long-term thought process,
right?
And there's not so much of the populist movement around getting things done. So basically, if you want, they make good long-term decisions. I mean, clearly, I don't think that they're moving down the electrification strategy just because of the thought of a clean planet. Very clearly, they looked at it and said, "How can we leapfrog the West?" It's a strategic move. I think it's quite smart. They've proved it's correct. 8% of their TIV right now is electric vehicles.
Yeah.
The rest of the world is 2%.
Yeah.
So they're mastering that technology, and from that position of strength, you can imagine how they might get to more domination in the world.
Yes.
So quite smart as a strategy. That ability to think long term is their advantage. As I say, there are many disadvantages and many things that you can criticise, but in terms of that particular point, it's almost certainly the reason why China is leading the world in EVs.
Well, I think to that point, just to conclude, I'm not a China expert. I'd like to see myself as a bit of a specialist on a few things. I go there from time to time. I think your vision, your focus on what you have, the heritage of both Aston Martin and Lagonda, I think positions you very, very well to be very successful in China. I don't know how that kind of fits at the moment in terms of how it is, but I'd be very confident, if I were in your shoes, of all the global markets, the one where, there's clearly the opportunity for great growth is that one.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard any of that.
It's a way to finish an interview with, I've had mainly electric cars with the internal combustion engines in the background, but maybe it makes a good contrast.
It does. Andy, I've got to say, it truly has been a thrill to meet you, and I am a huge admirer because, any kind of new innovation, any kind of new industry needs its champions and needs people to stand up and be counted and do stuff, not just talk about it. And you're a doer, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for talking to me.
Great to meet you finally.
Yeah, cheers, Andy.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.